Hi friends, it's Sarah from rufflesandrainboots.com, and today we're going to make a winter gnome with a free gnome pattern. Boop! If you would like to make it with me, just stick around. As always, please give this video a like so I know you're here crafting. So from the tippy top to the very bottom, we have an all white gnome made with a Dollar Tree beard and then whatever cool stuff you have on hand for accents. Down below, you can find the free pattern for this set of multiple gnomes made with this kind of hook style hat. So I used the pattern and cut the bottom the same, but on the top, I added a seam allowance all the way around. Now, the reason I did this is because we're going to sew and flip. If you are gluing, you can do this as well. Just put the right sides together, cut out the pattern, and then pin it all the way around. Take care to pin this hook very well. So what we're going to do when sewing is we're just going to go slow. If you're gluing, start at this point and use a detail tip glue gun. It will be your best friend. And remember, you can just tap the two pieces together and not squish them down. The body assembly is very easy. We're just going to put the right side of the fabric together and pin it along that long straight edge. We'll add the bottom after that is together. As I mentioned, I'm going to be sewing this, but you can hot glue this as well. I will talk you through the hot glue assembly, but it's been shown on this channel before. When you have the body created, the top stays open and the large circle piece is going to be aligned on the very bottom opening. You're going to hook or pin or glue one area in place, and then you're going to squish together both the body piece and the base piece, and you're just going to align where those two pieces creased right there, and you're just going to pin in place. If you are gluing this, I highly recommend still using pins because sometimes it takes a little bit of adjusting. For this, I am not using felt, I am using fleece. So I know the pattern calls out felt, but you can absolutely use this pattern with most semi-stretchy material. If you use it with cotton, you may have a little bit of problem turning out that hook piece, but the base part is super easy to do with cotton. So if you are new, go ahead and put a lot of pins in here. Again, you're just splitting the difference all the way around. Figure out where you want to start sewing or gluing and then just start. You're going to want to keep a 1/4 inch seam allowance. If you go any bigger than that, you may make it a little too narrow to actually hold the weight of the hat. So once I have the base piece, I'm going to pull it. And I always do this because especially if you're a new sewer, you want to make sure you have everything attached. There's no holes because we'll be filling it. Flip it right side out and run this bottom seam between your fingers. It's kind of akin to pressing without having to get out an iron. And so you're just rubbing it around. You want it to be able to sit on its own. And now to the hat. The really fun hook hat is so cool. Whether you sew or glue or use the original pattern, you're just going to start where the pattern indicates, start and reverse your stitches, and then go all the way up. Now, when you get to the hook, again, this is the only tricky part. You're going to want to make sure you stick with that seam allowance, okay? And just go really, really slow. So go a little bit, pick up your presser foot, turn the piece. A little bit more, pick up your presser foot, and turn the piece. That is the easiest way to do this. Just make sure you're trying to get a curve. If you are brand new to sewing, you can grab an erasable kind of sewing fabric marker and you can actually draw right on where you want to sew. That's a super great tip for beginners. Okay, so now when you get to the hook, or the point of the hook, you're going to want to reverse your stitches and then turn the entire piece around and go the opposite way. The reason is because if you want to add anything right there, you don't want the needle to separate your stitches. So you want to do a couple of good start and reversing just to lock those stitches into place. When you go all the way around the other side, just be sure to reverse your stitches as well. Again, I pull everything, I cut all my seam or my strings off, and then I'm going to turn this right sides out, taking care to get as much of that tip into my finger as I can. But honestly, I take the blunt edge of the scissors and just poke that through. If you go slow, you have no danger of poking out your stitches. If you sewed it, or I'm sorry, if you hot glued it, you're going to want to let it sit and actually set before you turn it right side out. But then everybody's going to be starting with this piece right here. We have a body and a base. I have a 5-inch circle made of knit fabric. I also have a needle and embroidery thread. And that's going to be my nose with little stuffing. I'm going to add something here on the tip. I have these kind of gray bells, which I thought were very wintry, along with this little craft store greenery and a Dollar Tree mop. I get asked a lot about if you can use this on gnome beards. The answer is absolutely yes, and it looks really cool. So in order to make a nose out of fabric and polyfill, just use an embroidery thread and needle. Do not knot the end, and then go around the entire outside edge about a ½ inch away from the edge. You're going to start and end on the outside edge so that when we pull it, it'll compress everything down into a nice little circle or oval. So just be sure to tear your polyfill pieces into small little chunks, and you can manipulate this any number of ways. So I overstuffed mine a little bit, so I'm going to pull it tight. I'm going to shape it into a little oval. You can do oval, you can do round, but I'm going to do double knots here, which just means you loop it through a couple times so you're less likely to, break the embroidery thread. Make sure you double knot that and do not cut these excess strings off. We'll be using those to attach. For the body, I recommend starting with at least ½ a cup of poly pellets. I don't use food products and I don't use anything that will absorb moisture like kitty litter or sand or salt. So I'm just going to tap that down on the table, make sure it's solid, make sure I get those poly pellets into the little seams, and then ripping apart more polyfill and stuffing that to the top. Do make sure you stuff it really well. I get a lot of complaints from people saying their gnome fell flat or their hats are flat or their body's not squishy. That's because we're not using enough polyfill, friends. I figured it out. And if you're selling your products, be sure to actually use enough. Speaking of enough, we're going to be able to tuck down small pieces of polyfill all the way into that hook. Do make sure, give it a couple squeezes. You want it to be dense. You don't want too much polyfill in there that it's stretching your seams, whether it's hot glue or it's sewing, but make it sure that it's really dense when you squish it. All right, now for the bottom of the hook, we're just going to throw in some polyfill, but it's really going to be dependent upon your body and your hat, okay? So what I mean by that is pull off a couple of pieces and make sure you get it about an inch and a half below that hook, and then stop for a second, put it on the body and see how much, if you need more polyfill. Line up the back seams of the hat and the body, and that is how we're going to pin this in place. Again, doesn't matter if you're gluing or you're sewing, just pin this thing down because we're going to be tugging on it when we determine where we want the beard and the nose. All right, so I just line it up with the bottom here and then put a little pin in it. So here's the cool part about this Dollar Tree. You can unravel it like by pulling, or you can just cut it off. I'm just going to cut it off. This makes a ton of gnome beards, okay? A ton. But they're these little bubbles that are tied together with string. So if you cut that, you see this little white string? That's all that it is holding these together. So you're just going to need a few inches of this. So just snippity-doo-dah those all up until, I would say don't go more than 4 inches for this particular body, but just place it against the whatever body you're working with. This stuff will get stringy, but don't worry, we'll give it a trim in a second. What we do need is to add a couple of these bubbles at the top because that's how we're going to secure this beard. Now you can secure it with hot glue like I'm going to do, or you can sew it on like we're going to do the nose. All right, so I just made 3 of these because this gnome is not that wide, and I'm going to be layering the white in the back and the gray on the top. I had some strings that were just off at the bottom, so I'm going to cut those off so I can get a good idea of the length of my beard. So there we go. That looks good. You see, you can turn this so it's all blended together, or you could have the gray on the top, white on bottom, or opposite. Now, don't glue it down or sew it down yet because the nose is more important. So remember those 2 strings that we left on the nose? We're going to sew those into the body. And the reason is because our beard is not flat, right? It's got those bubbly things. So we want to make sure the nose absolutely, unequivocally stays in place. And so I'm just going to take both of those strings individually and press them through the body. Now I can remove that needle because we don't need it. You see that? We're going to be tying that in just a second after we secure our beard. To secure it, I'm just going to hot glue mine, but again, you can sew it on. All right, so I'm just going to add the glue, push those tops through the strings of the nose. And that way they'll get all tucked up under that hat and we won't be able to see them. All right, so I'm just pulling everything out of the way before I pull back the strings on the nose. I tie that on, slip on the hat just to make sure I like where everything is placed, and then I'm going to glue it. I'm just going to glue this all right to the sides of the nose. I glue the hat to the body. Now I opted for no arms on this one, but you can absolutely add arms. I show you how in the pattern. They're just little rectangles. And then I just glued the hat all the way down. Here we go, all the way around. Now, as you can see, I lifted up the back of my hat to pull it off of the bottom seam, but that was because my nose was gargantuan. So cute. I love the big noses. So this stuff I just got at the Michael's Craft Store on sale, and I just glued it right to the side of the hat to give some interest. And then I'm going to be doing a bell up at the very, very top after I add on these berries. And all I did was just use the same needle and embroidery thread, ran it through, tied on the bell, and then cut off the, strings. Here we go. You can see I double knot this a lot, but I hide that right in the seam of the hat. And then you're done. This is a fun, quick project. The gnomes are a perfect size, a little bigger than tiered tray, a little smaller than standing on their own on the ground. I love this guy, but let me know what you think. Use the comments below and then like, share, and subscribe for more crafty fun.